The markets don't take a holiday, and neither should you when it comes to your market prep. What I want to do in this video is I want to walk you through the exact setups that I am targeting this week so you can trade with clarity and confidence while everybody else is guessing about what they're supposed to do next, okay? And if you like this video, go ahead and subscribe, like it, give me some comments, let me know how you feel about it. If enough people like this, I'll keep putting a video out like this every single week. So let's dive into what the markets did last week and where we could be headed this week. All right, so if we take a look at the SPY chart, you can see that after we had a gap up a couple weeks ago, we have made kind of a very slow move up, and then we've had kind of a very slow move down, all within basically the range of this gap up candle. This is what we call market balancing. This is just the market trying to figure out what it wants to do next. Usually the market waits for catalysts for big moves to happen, and also how it reacts to catalysts gives you an idea of exactly what it is that you might want to be paying attention to. And so we've had a few catalysts over the last couple weeks, and the fact that we haven't sold a ton is a bit surprising to me, and also gives me a little bit of a bullish leaning for the weeks ahead. So let's talk about kind of what happened last week and where we could be headed next. So last week we opened up with a gap down. If you'll remember, Moody's downgraded our credit rating, caused a gap down over the weekend, and there was a lot of fear in the market over the weekend ahead. And then one of the surprising things that happened is after the market gap down, it was just bought up all day on Monday, and it turned into a trend day. And then we had a couple of inside days with some selling pressure as the market rebalanced. Basically, that was Tuesday through Thursday of last week, and then on Tuesday through Thursday of last week. And then on Wednesday, the reason we had a big red candle on Wednesday of last week is because if you'll remember, we had the bond market auction in the middle of the day. The reason this is important is because this is people processing the Moody's credit downgrading. And what happened is people demanded a higher treasury yield in order to be comfortable buying bonds. And so because of that, that spooked the market. People started moving their money out of the market, moving their money into higher interest bonds, and that caused some selling in the market. We had balancing on Thursday after that, and then Friday we gapped down, more fear, and again that fear was bought up. Let's talk about the big picture though, okay? When you look at all of this, we are very, very close, probably within 5% or so of all-time highs in the market. So we've had a very large recovery already. The selling was fast, the buying back was fast, and so a little bit of a dip is something that's totally normal. I would actually call what we've been seeing in the markets, I would just call that basically normal bull market behavior, okay? The markets go up and they go down. Nothing happens in a straight line. There's going to be pullbacks before continuation. And so a couple things to keep in mind here. I wouldn't be surprised for us to see all-time highs. In the short term, we have to realize there's a gap to fill right here that's all the way down to 567.50 in the market. And we did begin filling that gap with the gap down on Friday. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see this gap fill before we continue higher. That would just be my base case, is that we fill the gap and we continue higher, or the market could just ignore that and we continue higher altogether. The only scenario I really see for further selling is if we can drop down below this more recent higher low here on the market of 556.04. That's when I start to really rethink my thesis. But for now, this just looks like typical bull market behavior. We're clearly in an uptrend, putting in higher highs and higher lows. We're coming off of a higher high. It would make sense that we make a lower low if the trend continues. All right, so let's talk about the important levels on SPY then. So the important levels on SPY that you want to watch are around the 600 mark. I'm going to zoom out to the weekly chart, take a look at this. So we've got this all-time high right up here around 613.23. That's going to be the next major level that we're looking for on the upside. I've already mentioned the resistance is kind of going to be that gap fill to the downside there. If we don't hold there, that's when you start to think, okay, what's going on here? Is there more consolidation? Are we going to continue putting in a higher low, or are we going to sell? Let's look at the QQQ chart and talk about that for a minute as well. I'm going to zoom in. I've got this little mark here at the gap fill that says watch out below, and that's because if we start to get into this range at all, then we could also see a gap fill here. Fortunately, even with the gap down on Friday, we didn't see any major selling pressure beyond that, and it was bought up, and it just kind of continued up and didn't even get into the range of the gap like SPY did. So again, this all looks pretty bullish for me. The areas to watch would be this gap low here of 5 Let's see here, 501.48. If it goes below that, I wouldn't be surprised to get a gap fill. The next support level on that would be here at 491.54. But if we can continue to break higher, let's zoom out a little bit to the weekly chart and look at the important levels to watch at that. It would be the all-time highs here at about 540.81. That's going to be the next resistance level ahead. So with all of that in mind and kind of this idea of where the market could be going, one of the things to keep in mind is next week, the market's closed on Monday. On Tuesday and Wednesday, there's not a lot of data that's dropping. Clearly, we're in a headline-driven market right now. Tariff wars are starting back up again and all of that kind of stuff, and anything could happen. But it's really important to know that, as far as the planned data drops, there's not a lot happening until the pre-market on Thursday and Friday. And so typically it takes some sort of catalyst to really launch off some sort of a trend day, at least a trend day that has any conviction or volume behind it. And so I would be looking for something like that before I really decided to go long or go short on any particular days in the overall market. So I would expect kind of some inside indecision for a little while until, and gaps to get filled, gaps in either direction to get filled until we get really a catalyst that's going to drive price further up or further down. So with all of that said in mind, let's talk about the top stocks that I'm watching into next week. Okay, the first one, this is going to be on a lot of people's radar, so I can't not talk about it. That would be NVIDIA. NVIDIA reports earnings middle of next week, and so people are going to be watching that. Again, this is a stock that when you look at the weekly chart, it looks clearly like it wants an all-time high at some point, okay? And so when you zoom into the daily chart on NVIDIA, you can see it looks very, very much like the rest of the market. The levels you're going to watch, there's a couple of gaps in a row here, but the levels you're going to want to watch are this gap low here of 120.28. The next resistance level below that being 118.23 down to the low of 115.21, and then the gap fill down here to 118.23. Okay, so those are kind of the levels that you're going to want to watch to the downside, and then the all-time high on this one is up here at 153.13 when you count the reverse splits and stuff like that. So those are kind of the key levels that you're going to want to watch into earnings, and just keep an eye on that. NVIDIA is a tech leader, and so if NVIDIA reports good earnings, good revenue, good guidance, like beats all across the board, this could be a catalyst that drives the markets in general, particularly QQQ, which is tech heavy and tech focused. That could drive that to all-time highs. It could drive SPY to all-time highs, or it could also factor in some selling as well if it doesn't do too great. So you're going to want to really keep an eye on NVIDIA because it's going to lead the rest of the market. A couple other names that I wanted to draw your attention to. The first of those would be AAP. This is Advanced Auto Parts. I know that a lot of people probably don't consider Advanced Auto Parts it's not something you see a lot of retail traders talking about, but you can see there was this large gap candle on Thursday of last week where we gapped way up and then finished very, very high on the day. The reason that happened is because they reported good earnings, good revenue, and then they actually increased their guidance. A lot of companies right now are really uncertain. They're not really releasing a lot of guidance because they're afraid of the tariff wars. They don't know how things are going to impact them. Some big companies have even suspended guidance. And yet, AAP increased their guidance in the middle of all of this, whereas a lot of companies are bringing this down. And so they're very, very confident in where they are right now. And so this led to a gap up, and it led to some serious buying. If you zoom out to the weekly chart, you can see that this had been basing for quite a while, and it actually broke out of a downtrend with this buying. So the way that I'm approaching this one is simple. I've got this one on my watch list to watch for breakouts. Typically what happens when you have a really, really large candle, you will either get immediate continuation to the upside until, buyers are exhausted, or you're going to end up getting some sort of consolidation. And you can see that what we had here the next day, while the market was gapping down and having some pressure and all of that kind of stuff, you can see that we actually had consolidation. And so what I'm watching for is potential breakouts to the upside. I'm looking for a potential continuation on this one since it still looks pretty strong, and it was just an inside candle on Friday. So what I would be looking for this one in particular, if I were going to play this, I would be watching on the smaller time frames. Let's see here if I can pull this up on my chart. So I'd be watching on the smaller time frames for the pre-market levels, kind of setting those for the day, and I'd be looking for potential breakouts of the pre-market high. I'd be looking at opening range breaks on these. For those of you that follow my trading system, particularly, I'd be looking at fashionably late trades, which is not something I came up with. That's a trade setup of S&B Capital. I'd be looking at bread and butter breakouts. I would be looking at back through opens. I would be looking at potential like unstoppable open trades and stuff like that. These are all trade setups that I teach inside my community, but this one's on my radar for early next week to see if we get some continuation. On a similar front here, we have UEC. This is a nuclear stock. And if you look at the daily chart on this one, you can see we had a big gap up on Friday with this for a couple of reasons. One, when the market sells, energy stocks tend to go up, at least initially. And so some of this was a gap up just on the overall market gapping down. But it also continued. And the reason it continued is because Trump, he signed some orders basically saying we're going to prioritize some nuclear energy. And he's talked about making regulations a little lighter so that nuclear energy can more easily get a foothold. And so because of that, nuclear stocks took off. UEC is one of those stocks that really took off. And so what I would be looking for on this one, because we had such strength on this day, we're talking about 25% move up in a day. I would like to see one of two things. Either on Monday, we continue higher. We kind of break beyond the previous day's high pretty early in the day and continue. Or we get a day or two of like inside consolidation, and then we break out on day like 3 or 4. Those are kind of the two scenarios that I would be watching, particularly on this stock. And the way that I would be looking to trade this would be very, very similar to the setups that I just mentioned on AAP. So I'd be looking for fashionably late trades. I'd be looking for unstoppable open trades. I'd be looking for back through open trades. And I'd be watching the pre-market high and low and the previous day's high and low for signs of when to go long, particularly on this stock, and hopefully catch a nice, decent trend day on this one, okay? So those are kind of the main stocks that are on my radar for this week. So now I want to talk a couple of minutes about how I'm preparing for this week, okay? So let me talk about some of the setups that have been working for me recently, and we'll just kind of review some of the trades that I've taken. QUBT, quantum names are really, really hot right now. Last week was a week of quantum names, and so this one, you can see that back here on, let's see, this was the 16th of May. QUBT had a gap up, and then we had some consolidation before we finally broke out through that gap up high about 5 days later on Friday. Okay, so this is a perfect setup for a small cap gap. For a while, it was a little tough to swing trades in the market, but this is actually becoming more and more of a swing trading market as we've taken this kind of shift more bullish and putting in higher lows and stuff like that in the overall market. And so QUBT is a prime example of a great small cap gap swing trade that we were able to take using the 4-hour chart. You can see here that on the 4-hour chart, I'm going to throw my studies up here. On the 4-hour chart here, you can see that back here we went into oversold territory, and we were very, very close to this gap candle low. And so for there, I liked the risk reward on kind of oversold territory on the 4-hour chart using the 5-period RSI. I liked how we were sitting right near a resistance level. So the risk to reward was pretty like high, like low risk, high reward. And just a few days later, this was the short-term bottom. And from our entry in the community, we're up over 30% on this trade already. And this is something that I'm seeing happen fairly regularly right now with the small cap gap. If you want to know how to trade the small cap gap strategy, that's something I teach for free over on my YouTube channel. Make sure you go check that out. All right. Something else that has been working for me in recent days would be just kind of this idea of end of day continuation. KDLY is a stock that had some really good, let's see if I can get this to pull up. All right, that one is not wanting to populate, so we'll skip it and maybe we can come back to it in just a minute. Another one would be something that's happened recently is when the market has been gapping, those gaps have been getting filled on the same day. So A good rule of thumb is when you see the market gapping, when you see the market or a stock gapping down into a support level, then your bias is going to be long. You're going to just kind of understand that, like, hey, that's into a support level, my bias is long, and when it gaps up into a resistance level, your bias is going to be short. And then, if it gaps up into like no man's land or down into no man's land, whether that's gap fills or all-time highs or whatever, that's when you kind of want to think, could we, could be continuing, okay? And so lately, one of the things that's been working really, really well is fading the gaps, okay? And so you can see if we look at the daily chart on QQQ, you can see that on Monday of last week, we had a gap down, and then we just continued higher for the day, okay? We had a few inside days, and then on Friday, we had another gap day, and that gap was bought up. This is something that's been happening a lot in the market lately. As a matter of fact, I traded this on Friday, so I'll show you an example of this so you can see it for yourself. On Friday, we gapped down. We hit a pre-market low down here, and then after some initial consolidation near the beginning of the day, we eventually broke out of the opening range, continued higher, and if you look at some of the different indicators that I use, you can see that we never really held below VWAP all day. We just kind of bounced off of VWAP most of the day. And so we had a nice, decent trend day all the way up to the previous day's low, okay? Or I'm sorry, the previous day's high. So we gapped down, we went right back into the previous day's range, and then we continued up to the previous day's high before selling off. And so this is something that I'm seeing happen a lot in the market. And so you want to pay attention when the market gaps or when a particular stock gaps, if there's resistance or support, kind of banking on the gap fill, or at least taking trades in the direction of the gap fill. Those have been working really, really well. Let's try one more time and see if we can get KDLY to show up. No. All right, so I'll look at AAP then. We can look back a couple days here and see a good example of this. So one of the things that's also been working is end of day continuation. When you see a stock that gaps up on news, typically I'm not going to trade that right like at the beginning of the trade. I'm not going to take continuation or anything like that unless maybe it's just made an all-time high with the gap up. But I am going to keep an eye on it for the rest of the day. And when something gaps up and continues strong the rest of the day, then that's on my radar for an end-of-day continuation trade. And you can see that we, around the lunchtime period, started to go into this range right here. And then towards the end of the day, we had a breakout to our daily high. And just a quick little scalp, that's something that you can do. That's been working out a lot for me, okay? So hopefully this video was helpful for you. If you want my full playbook on how I take trades, if you want daily trade ideas, if you want personal support, or if you just want to be a part of an encouraging trade community, go to the link in my video description and you can join it over there. We have a free community, we have paid community, I offer coaching, all of that kind of stuff as well too. Drop your questions, drop the stocks that you are watching in the comments below. Let me know if you've got any questions. Like and subscribe to stay up to date, and I hope you guys have a great week of trading.